Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea Jordan and I'm happy to share my capstone presentation with you today. Before we get into the details of my project, let me provide a bit of background information about myself. Over the past 5 years, I've been working in the customer service industry. It was during my time at Discover Financial Services, I realized I had a passion for data analysis and visualization. From there, I embarked on a self-teaching journey to delve into Python and SQL. However, navigating this path on my own became challenging, prompting me to enroll in Savvy Coder's Data Analytics and Python Bootcamp. This experience has been instrumental in deepening my proficiency in SQL, Excel, Python, and Tableau. For my capstone project, I decided to explore this question: what is the greatest album of the 2010s? The inspiration for this topic happened while I was listening to my Spotify Rap playlist for 2022. It occurred to me that Spotify Rap has become our modern version of the VH1 specials like the greatest songs of the 90s and the greatest songs of the 2000s. Surprisingly, there are no such specials for the greatest songs of the 2010s, which sparked curiosity to research the music released from 2010 to 2020. Rather than focusing on individual songs, I chose to research the greatest album. During this bootcamp, I used agile methods to help me not only with my capstone project, but also when it came to learning the material. I learned to become more open-minded and to embrace change more. For the second half of the bootcamp, I was a product owner on my team. During our daily stand-ups, I would use Jira to create sprints, create backlogs, do backlog grooming, and create stories with story points. Considering that there are multiple factors that play into an album's success, I chose to evaluate it based on three key aspects: the number of copies sold worldwide, the number of Grammys awards received, and the duration an album spent at number one on the Billboard 200 chart. The Billboard 200 is a weekly ranking of the 200 most popular music albums and EPs. As a part of this analysis, I expanded my project to explore some additional questions. This included identifying the most successful artists of the decade and investigating whether an album must be number one on the Billboard 200 for a specific duration to win a Grammy. I also aimed to determine if there is a correlation between album sales and Grammy wins for artists. I found my first data set on Kaggle. It shows the top 15 highest selling albums for each year from 1990 to 2022. Since I wasn't able to find any data sets for the Grammys or Billboard 200 chart, I decided to create my own data set, which shows how many Grammys each album won and how many weeks was each album number one on the Billboard 200. For data cleaning, utilized VS Code and within it Jupyter Notebook. Using Python in the pandas library, I imported my initial data set. Recognizing the presence of unnecessary columns, I opted to drop several of them. After removing these columns, the new data set went from 12 to 6 columns. I then saved this refined data set into a new CSV file. I utilized SQL to clean my dataset from the new CSV file, which included albums spanning from 1990 to 2022. I did face some challenges during this process. I initially considered using the drop column command to eliminate albums not from the 2010s. However, I soon realized that the solution lay in deleting rows rather than columns. After simple research, I discovered that the delete clause could effectively remove all rows corresponding to albums outside the 2010 decade. After this action left me with 165 albums. I then used the inner join clause to merge this data set with another that detailed the number of Grammys each album won and the weeks each album spent at number one on the Billboard chart. Once the data sets were successfully combined, I saved the resulting data set into a new CSV file for further analysis. I imported the new CSV from SQL into Tableau and began creating my graphs. The first chart comprises of the highest selling albums of each year from 2010 to 2020. Notably, the data reveals that in 2011, the highest selling album surpassed all the other years. Adele's album 21 sold 30 million copies worldwide. In second place came Adele's album 25, which was released in 2015 and sold approximately 23 million copies worldwide. In third place came Ed Sheeran's album Divide, which was released in 2017 and sold 13.4 million copies worldwide. The second chart showcases the albums with the highest number of Grammy wins. Topping the list is Adele's 21, securing an impressive 7 Grammy Awards. Tied for the second position are Bruno Mars' 24K Magic and Billie Eilish's album When We Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go, each claiming 6 Grammy Awards. Taking the third spot is Adele's 25, each, um, winning 5 Grammys. And in fourth position, a three-way tie ensues with Kendrick Lamar's Damn, Lady Antebellum's Need You Now, and Daft Punk's Random Access Memories, all earning 5 Grammy Awards each. This line chart illustrates the relationship between the number of Grammy Awards won by each album and their corresponding average worldwide sales. According to the data, the albums that did not win a Grammy had an average sales figure of 4.1 million. In contrast, the albums that won one Grammy had an average sales figure of 4.7 million. Notably, albums that won 6 Grammy Awards demonstrated an average sales figure of 5.1 million. This analysis suggests that there really isn't a certain threshold of album sales required to win a Grammy. The bar chart depicts the albums that held the number one position on the Billboard 200 chart for the longest duration. Leading the list is Adele's album 21, maintaining the number one spot for an impressive 24 weeks. In second place is the soundtrack of the movie Frozen. It was number one for 13 weeks. Taking third place is Drake with his album Views, which topped the Billboard chart for 12 weeks. This next chart shows the correlation between the Grammys and the Billboard 200. You can see here that there really isn't a correlation at all. Just because an album was number one on the Billboard 200 chart for a long time doesn't mean that it won a large number of Grammys. For example, Frozen was number one on the Billboard chart for 13 weeks and only won 2 Grammys. However, Adele's album 25 was number one on the Billboard chart for 10 weeks and won 5 Grammys. Drake's album Scorpion was number one on the Billboard chart for 5 weeks and only won 1 Grammy. This bar chart shows the artists that sold the most albums between 2010 and 2020. Unsurprisingly, you see that Adele sold 53 million albums during this decade. Taylor Swift ended up selling 45 million albums during this decade, and Drake came in third place, selling about 36 million albums during this decade. I feel like at this point, we all know who sold the most albums and which album is the most successful. However, I wanted to give another visual to represent Adele's impact on the music industry during this decade. This chart shows the highest number of copies of an album sold within each Grammy category. The Grammy categories are separated into how many Grammys an album won, which ranges from 1 to 7. Right now, this chart shows the highest number of copies sold within each Grammy category without Adele's influence. You can see that in the category that won 3 Grammys, Ed Sheeran's album Divide sold 14.3 million copies, which is the highest amount of copies sold overall, even including the albums that won 6 Grammys. However, when you click the filter to add Adele, you can see that the chart changes drastically. What was once the highest point on the chart becomes a halfway mark for the album that sold the highest number of copies and also won the most albums. Or, I'm sorry, also won the most Grammys. Adele's album 21 won 7 Grammys and sold 30 million copies. That's double the amount of Ed Sheeran's album Divide. Even her album 25 is still higher than Divide because it sold 23 million copies and won 5 Grammys. Based off my analysis, it shows that the greatest album of the 2010s is Adele's album 21 because it sold 30 million copies, won 7 Grammys, and was number one on the Billboard 200 chart for 24 weeks. Adele is also the most successful artist of this decade because she sold 53 million copies total, won a total of 12 Grammys, and was number was number one on the Billboard 200 chart for 24 weeks throughout the whole decade. My analysis also shows that there really isn't a certain amount of albums an artist needs to sell to win a Grammy. Additionally, the analysis revealed that there is no correlation between an album's position on the Billboard 200 and the number of weeks it spends at number one with its likelihood of winning a Grammy. Although I learned a lot from this bootcamp, my data analysis journey does not end here. I will continue to get certificates to deepen my knowledge and hope to land a data analyst job soon. I want to give a big thank you to everyone at Savvy Coders, including my team, because without them, I wouldn't have been able to do this. Thank you so much for tuning into my presentation.